Now, if you're a parent, you're going to relate to what I'm going to tell you next. Picture just your average week evening or maybe a Saturday, and Michaela and I need to run some errands. So we're all going to go out as a family. So I need to put shoes on Cohen, okay? And he's standing across the room from me, so I say, "Cohen, come here." Now, he knows what "come here" means, and he knows I'm talking to him, but he just stares at me. So I give him a moment to make a decision. Is he going to obey or is he not going to obey? Is he going to make the wise decision or the unwise decision? When it is clear that he's made the unwise decision, I go ahead and I start heading towards him. And he realizes that some discipline is on the way. He realizes that he's made a mistake. And so then he starts running towards me because he thinks, okay, well, now that I see that there's a consequence for my decision, I'm going to try to obey now. And he does that in an attempt to avoid the inevitable. He thinks that by running towards me and obeying me much, much too late, he'll be able to avoid any type of discipline. He's wrong. He's still gonna be disciplined. But that's what he's trying to do. He sees that there's a consequence for disobeying, and only when it is clear that that consequence is about to happen does he change his mind, and he wants to obey now. Obey now. If you're a parent, you've probably been in that exact same situation in the past. And even if you're not a parent, you've probably seen it in your nieces or nephews or children of friends. Perhaps some of you remember doing this to your parents, because it goes a lot past a year and a half old from what I've seen. You know what I'm talking about. Well, there's a story in the Old Testament that reminds me of children. In Numbers chapters 13 and 14, that's where we're going to be spending our time today. In Numbers chapter 13 and 14, we see the Israelites, and quite frankly, we see them acting like children, okay? Like small children who want to get away with what they want to get away with. So we won't read the entirety of chapters 13 and 14, but just to kind of refresh your memory, this is when God tells Moses, send 12 spies into the land of Canaan and let them spy out the land and bring back a report. So they send a spy from each tribe of Israel, and we will recognize two of the names, Joshua and Caleb, who become pretty prominent characters in Israelite history after this. So they go out and they spy the land, and it's a great land. It's a prosperous land. It is a land they describe as flowing with milk and honey. They bring back a single cluster of grapes on a rod carried between two men. That's how fruitful this land is. And they come back, and 10 of the spies, all of them except Joshua and Caleb, say, it's a prosperous land, it's fruitful, it's wonderful, we would love to live there, but the people are many, and they are mighty, they are huge. We can't take them. We cannot defeat these people. Joshua and Caleb say, no. It's a great land, and we're going in. We need to do this. But it was too late. The people of Israel had heard the report of the 10 spies, and they say, at the beginning of chapter 14, they say, all right, let's pick a new leader. Forget Moses, let's pick a new leader, and let's head back to Egypt. The land where they were enslaved and beaten and killed. And they said, you know what? Let's go back there. Because you just brought us out here to die at the hand of the Canaanites and the Amalekites. Well, God responds to that. He said, all right, I'm just going to wipe you out. I'm done. I'm done with all the people. And Moses intercedes. So God relents, but he says there's still going to be a punishment. First of all, the 10 spies that brought back the bad report, he strikes them with a plague. Second of all, he says, every man above the age of 20 who saw what I did in Egypt and in the wilderness will not make it into the promised land. Instead, you're going to wander and your children will get to go into the promised land. When Moses tells the people that, they say, okay. Just like when Cohen sees that I'm about to come in punishment, God says, you're not making it into the land. You made your decision. And they say, okay, no, wait. At the end of chapter 14, they say, we'll go. We will go take the land that the Lord has promised to us. We'll go up and fight. And Moses says, it's too late. The Lord is no longer with you. Don't go. Well, they went anyway. And they got thoroughly swatted, thoroughly defeated. You see, the 10 spies were not wrong in their estimation of the land. They weren't even wrong in the estimation of the people. The people were too great and too mighty for the Israelites. What they were wrong about was their estimation of God. Their success in the land of Canaan depended on the Lord. It depended on God. They weren't wrong in saying, the people will beat us. We can't beat them. That would be true if it weren't for God. Their success depended on God. And that's made clear at the end of chapter 14. If we start reading in chapter 14, verse 39, this is right after Moses told the people, listen, you're going to be punished. None of you are going to make it into the promised land. And Moses says in chapter 14, verse 39, when Moses told these words to all the people of Israel, the people mourned greatly. And they rose early in the morning and went up to the heights of the hill country, saying, here we are. We will go up to the place that the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. But Moses said, why now are you transgressing the command of the Lord when that will not succeed? Do not go up, for the Lord is not among you, lest you be struck down by your enemies. For there the Amalekites and the Canaanites are facing you, and you shall fall by the sword. Because you have turned back from following the Lord will not be with you. Moses says, your success depends on the Lord. The Israelites failed because the Lord was not with them. And there are 3 things that we can see in this story that the Israelites lacked. They did not have that would have made the difference. That would have made the difference between failure and success. The first thing is faith. The Israelites did not have an adequate faith in God. They did not trust that God could conquer the Canaanites for them. That's why they said, let's pack up and go back to Egypt. It'd be better to be slaves than to be dead. And that's why God says, none that witnessed the miracles that I worked in Egypt and in the wilderness will get to see it, because you should know better. That's what he's telling them. You should have faith. You should have trust in me. You've seen what I can do. And yet you're afraid of these people? They lacked adequate faith in God. They also lacked a fear of God. We don't talk about fear of God a whole lot. But they only feared God when they saw that punishment was imminent. That's when they finally decided, okay, we are fearing you now. We are scared of what's about to happen. But the problem was that their fear only came at the end, and it wasn't paired with obedience. They feared God so much that then they didn't obey him. They didn't follow what he actually told them to do. When Moses said, "Do not go, the Lord is no longer with you," they went ahead anyway because they didn't fear God. Fearing God without obeying God makes zero sense. In fact, it means that your fear is not grounded in reality. It's not grounded in the reality of who God is or what he can do. Their fear of God was simply fear of the punishment that he brought, but not enough to obey him. And that's the third thing. The third thing that the Israelites were missing, they were lacking, that would have made the difference, and that was obedience. They needed to obey God, but they refused to do so. In fact, they even try to use God's promise of the land as an excuse to go up. They said, "We'll go up to the place that he promised and we'll fight." And Moses said, "It's too late. God has a new instruction for you. Go wander in the wilderness because you're not making it in." But they refused to listen to God speaking through Moses on that occasion. Kind of acting like a small child, only willing to obey to avoid punishment, not having the faith in God or the fear of God or the obedience to God that would have made them successful in conquering the land. Now, I think we're all pretty familiar with that story. But what about us? I mean, that's what we need to ask when we see a story such as this one. What about this story informs us on how we can better serve God? I've been tossing around the word success. So here's a question. What is success in the life of a Christian? Success in the life of a Christian. It's not a metric that we can quantify like we might in a business situation. Success is a certain amount of sales or a certain amount of customer acquisition. Or in athletics, it's a certain number of games won versus a certain number of games lost. What's success in the life of a Christian? Is pleasing God. If you want to be successful as a Christian, if we want to be a successful Christian, that means living a life pleasing to God. And the three things that the Israelites lacked in this story are three things that can help us and lead us to living a life pleasing to God. To be a successful follower, a successful Christian. So let's talk about faith. We're not going to go super in depth. We're not going to go do an in-depth study of Hebrews 11 or anything like that. But faith, trust in God, trusting what he is capable of, his power, but also trusting his character, that he will do what he said he will do. It's a faith that's based on our knowledge of God, of what he has done and what he has promised. Faith in God is a first key component, a key to success. And here's the thing. These are all interwoven. That's why I have them the way I have them up on the board. These all overlap. So let's say with faith, let's say you're obedient, but you don't have faith. What good is that? It's mechanical. There's no foundation. There's no motivation. You're simply going through the motions with no purpose. Faith in God, trust in God is the motivation for obedience. And without it, obedience is simply mechanical. Faith is key to success as a Christian. What about fear? Again, we don't talk about fear, I think, a whole lot. Now, there were probably times in recent history where Christians talked a lot about fear. There's the classic sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And that's a sermon that's meant to strike fear into the hearts of people. Simply put, if we don't fear God, we don't understand God. God is meant to be feared. Just as much as he is meant to be loved, God is meant to be feared. Just as much as he is merciful and loving, he is just. And the scriptures talk about the anger and the wrath of God. If we don't fear God, we don't understand him. Jesus says in Matthew 10, don't fear those that can harm the body, speaking of the persecution that the Christians would face. He said, fear the one who can destroy both body and spirit in hell. And there's only one person that can do that. We have to fear God. If we don't, it means we have an incomplete understanding of the nature and character of our Creator. All right. Obedience. Obedience. This is the one that we probably talk about the most. Perhaps even more than the faith side of things, we talk about obedience. In Numbers chapter 14, this phrasing just is so striking. And at the end, after Moses says, don't go, you will not succeed, the Lord is not with you. In verse 44, it says, but they presumed to go up to the heights of the hill country, although neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses departed out of the camp. They presumed to go up. God gave a clear instruction, and they presumed to do otherwise. Obedience is key because it is a show that we have faith in God, and we will obey him because we have faith in him and because we fear him. Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. That's a pretty simple statement. And that should strike us. If we don't obey the Lord, if we don't obey his word, then we don't love him. I'm not saying if we ever make a mistake, then we don't love him. What he's saying here is you need to do your very best to keep my commandments if you love me. Jesus demands obedience. And the thing is, just like we did with faith, if you have obedience without faith, the obedience is mechanical. It's without foundation. It's lifeless. But the same goes here. If you have faith without obedience, well, what does James say about that? It's dead. Faith without action is dead. Obedience is a key component to success in the life of a Christian. 3 keys to success that the Israelites did not have in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. And we need as Christians, if we want to be pleasing to God, if we want to be successful as a Christian. But there's one key thing that all of these overlap on. There's one key thing that connects all 3. And that is that they're in relation to God. No amount of faith, no amount of fear, no amount of obedience will do a thing. It will not help us. It will not make us successful. It will not make us pleasing to God if it's not in relation to God. No amount of faith in our family and our family's traditions and standards is going to make us pleasing to God. No amount of fear of society's judgmental eye will make us pleasing to God. No amount of obedience to cultural norms and standards will make us pleasing to God. These only help us on the path to success if they're in relation to God. If it is faith in God and fear of God and obedience to God. Because just like the Israelites in Numbers chapter 13 and 14, our success depends on God. Without Him, we can't be successful. We can't be pleasing. He is the key factor in a Christian's success. I can't emphasize enough that these three things have to be in relation to the Creator of all things to be worth anything. That's the key to success. At the beginning, I told you a little story about Cohen. Parents, when you discipline your children, why do you do that? When they won't come across the room because you want to put their shoes on, and they disobey you, why do you make it clear to them that that's not acceptable behavior? I can tell you why I do it. Because him crossing the living room to come to me so I can put his shoes on, that's a little thing. But when he's running toward the road and I say, Cohen, stop, come here, I need him to follow at my word. I need him to listen and obey without question, without hesitation, for his own good. I need him to do that. And that's why the training happens in the little things. Because I want him to follow me at my word, so that I can protect him, so that I can lead him to safety. God wants to lead us to safety. He wants to take us down the best possible path for our lives. He wants us to follow him at his word. He wants to be able to say, come, and us come. He wants to be able to say, go, and us go. For our own good, for our own salvation. It's for our benefit. That's why, just like a parent, he needs us to follow him at his word. Through faith, in fear, in obedience. God wants us to follow at his word. He's our Father. And just as I, as a father, want Cohen to follow at my word, he wants us to follow at his. He wants us to use our relationship with him to have a faith in him, a fear of him, and an obedience to him. And that's my challenge to you this morning. As a child of God, if you are a child of God, remember that your Father wants you to be successful. He wants me to be successful as a Christian, and that means pleasing to him. So when he tells us go, or when he tells us come, or when he tells us stop, we need to listen. It may seem like a little thing, but he is training us and guiding us down the best possible path for our lives. And we don't want to end up wandering in the wilderness, missing out on the promised land. If you're not a child of God, then you have no relationship with the Father. When he says come or go, you don't necessarily care because you don't see him as the father of all humanity and the father of the faithful. But that's the key. Here's the thing. Success in any quantifiable, physical way pales in comparison to success in the life of a Christian. Success in leading a life pleasing to God. And if you're not a child of God, that's where it starts. Recognizing him as your Father. Submitting your life to him as your guide and as your teacher and as your God. And leading a life of faith and fear and obedience to him. And that can all begin right now. We want to help you begin that life right now. If there's any way that we can help you with that, please come right down here while we stand and while we sing.